Hello and welcome back to our free motion quilting series where we teach you 4 basic and really common free motion quilting stitches and then show you how you can change them up to an infinite number of possibilities and combinations to make each quilt look unique with just mastering 4 simple stitches. So this section of the course, we're going to focus on the swirl. This is a really common design that you see all the time. It's a really great one to master. It works great for both all over quilt designs and then also some custom work where you're just working inside quilt blocks or in backgrounds, and we're going to cover all of that today. Well, in the next couple of videos anyway. So what we're going to start with, since this is the first time we're doing the swirl in this series, is we're going to start with a stencil. This stencil is a little bit different than some of the other ones because it fits in. You can see that we have a section over here and then a section to the left, and it alternates. And what that does is it fits in really nicely once we have it all marked out. And you can see where it just kind of goes from place to place, and it just fits in really nicely with one another. So what I'm going to do today, actually, it goes this way. This is up and down. So we can see here, here's a good one. It kind of comes around and loops. And so we have this whole centerpiece, and then it's going to come over and hit this swirl, and then it's going to work its way back over. So you're basically traveling from left to right. Now this section, you see there are a bunch of registration marks. You're going to use those registration marks or targets to line up with one another to get it to go on. And I shot some video of my process of me marking this. If you need to know specifically how to mark using the stencils, we covered that in one of the first videos of this series, so go back and watch that. But this one's a little bit different, so I wanted to at least show you the video of my process of going back and forth so you can kind of watch and follow along for that. All right, so now let's get into the actual quilting section of this. So what makes this one different, and this is a common one thing when people are doing the swirls, is they often will have you swirl into the center and then you work your way back out, but a lot of them will have these little points that stick out as well. So like you've done your whole swirl, we've come in, we've come out, and we've done a point. Then we do a little bit of a swirl and point, point, and then you're kind of like bouncing around to get to your next one. And that's kind of a way that it travels around and still creates that nice swirl. So this is a more complicated way to do the swirl. And so this is a good one to get your muscle memory down when you're doing it. It just has a little bit fancier look to it when it's all done. As long as you have lines to follow, it's pretty easy to make that work. Later in the actually very next video, I'm going to show you a less complicated version of the swirl that eliminates this point. So if this is like you give it a go and you're like, I can't do this, like I cannot handle that little point, don't worry, we have a little bit less intense version of it coming up. Not that this is bad, you're going to have a line to follow, but there are easier ways to do it, and we're going to do that in the next video. But for now, let's go ahead and we're just going to follow along. And what I'm going to do, so you saw when I marked everything overhead, is that I marked this first one going back and forth with my swirl, this part of the swirl hitting right here on the edge of my block. And then I went in and I filled in so that way I would have a nice full block when everything is said and done. So what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to stitch all that first line so I can have one continuous line going back and forth all the way across. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to do my sides, and then from there on out I'll be able to do 2 more full rows just marking going straight through. So let's get some quilting gloves on and start doing this with needle and thread. All right, first we're going to start off and get that rhythm. I want to get that sweet spot of good speed on your sewing machine and good distance between your threads, because remember, you are the stitch regulator here. All right, now we're going to go around to that first little point. Now remember, we want to make sure that we are lifting and not sliding our hands as we're doing this, because if we slide our hands, we are going to move off all of that chalk and we won't be able to see where we're supposed to go. So whenever you have to reposition your hands, make sure that you are lifting them and moving them instead of dragging them across. All right, so we made it around that first little bit, And again, we are just following those lines. All right, I'm coming up to a point here. I'm starting to lose control. So now is a good time to stop, reposition my hands, because I'm gonna be headed over here next, where we're going left to right. So now I'm gonna reposition my hands so that they're kind of around that next swirl that's to the right a little bit. And every time you get started again, you got to go through that process of figuring out your sweet spot. And you kind of want to be in the moment. When you're not, you're like me and just talking through it, you end up with those really weird little swirls like I just had there, where you don't have a nice smooth line. So be in the moment, be present with what you're doing, mindful of what's going on. Don't think about it when you make mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes. You got to let it go, and you got to move on and think about what you're doing right then and there, or you're going to make more mistakes if you're dwelling on the last one that you messed up. All right, so I think I'm going to stitch until I get into the center of my next swirl, because we're off to the left now and my hand is on top of the swirl. So I definitely need to adjust my hand position here. All right, so we're going to stop right in that point. The reason why I like to stop in points is because it allows me to get out of that point. I can stitch in place for a little bit until I get up to the speed that I think is right for me. That's my sweet spot. And it doesn't like look weird. Like, it doesn't look like I've come out of it in a weird spot. Because if you stop in the middle of a curve, it's really hard to come out of that and not have it look weird and keep that same path. But if you stop at a point, it's a lot easier to just keep going, because obviously you're going to be changing direction at a point. All right, and we're at a point now where I need to change, because obviously my thumb is over this entire swirl. So I'm going to move my hands again so that way we can do the swirl to the side. And I really could be zooming through this, but I'm not. I'm trying to just really carefully follow that line, have good stitch length, really stay on that line as much as I can. You want to kind of follow the idea of the line. It doesn't matter if you're exactly on the line, because the line's going to go away eventually. Like this one is a little close to the marking to the side, so obviously I want to come in a little bit so my stitching lines aren't right on top of it. All right, I'm going to be able to come into the center here, and then I'm going to need to stop again, because everything that I need to quilt next is underneath where my hand was. So you always kind of want to quilt with your hands in between whatever it is you're going to be quilting, so you can move that around nice and easily. We're now coming to the end of the block. You can see that we're kind of coming around and following those lines. And if I were to keep going, there would be another swirl here, and eventually it would start going over to the side. I'm just going to quilt a little bit of this and kind of go around. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop and break my threads, and we're going to start over filling in this side now. All right, so this is that little half row that we did. You can see that we've quilted that first pass, and then this was that part that I filled in partially. So that way it would be filled in nicely and evenly. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start quilting in here, and anytime I come off where the line goes to the side, I'm just gonna real quick quilt a section of that, and then just kind of follow my lines down, traveling in the batting part of it wherever I need to. This is how you would handle it if we're quilting edge to edge and it went off the side of the quilt as well. All right, so we are, we've got the end of the swirl. I'm just going to quilt down the side here and fill in this little curly cube here. We're going to travel, hit this little line, travel a little more on the outside, and now I get to start this longer section here. Come in and get this little curly cue again. Get this little curve. All right, now we get one more larger section, and then we filled in everything. We've got our first pass done plus our little fill in. So now we're going to start doing another one of these side to side passes starting right here. So we'll be going to the side and then coming right in to fill in here. Now these are decisions that you are going to make when you're doing this without a stencil organically. You're going to need to be able to come in and out so you can fill it in and have it look nice and staggered. But this is a good reason why we use a stencil, because it teaches you how to do that and how you should move back and forth with your rows so that it doesn't look like straight rows going up and down. All right, now as you are coming to come into this curve that meets in, sometimes your lines might be really close to each other. Maybe you marked it a little too close, or you just got off a little on your stitching line. Feel free to adjust as needed as you're doing that so that it looks good in the end, because remember, these lines are going away. Nobody's gonna know if you stitch off a little bit to make the end stitching look better. definitely need to stop here and move so that way I can see everything I'm doing next. See that we've kind of come off here, so I'm going to go ahead and just quilt this little bit here. Not totally even sure what it goes to, but I know it needs to be filled in. And then we can hit the rest of this when we quilt our last section. All right, so we've got another partial row here. We can see more of it than we could when we were just doing the tiny little bit, but that's all I've got left, and then this block is done. One thing that's noted here is my lines actually don't start until I'm about a quarter of the way in, quarter inch in. And I started a ways over because I want that curve to kind of flow into it, kind of follow the line of what it's gonna be. So keep that in mind if your markings don't start all the way at the edge of your quilt block. I got way off of the suggested line there. No big deal. That's not going to be the end of the world. All right, so for this one, I just kind of continued that line because there wasn't really anything over there anyway. It's going to work out and be just fine. Off on that one too, but again, no big deal. The lines are going away real soon. You are not a machine. You are a person. It is going to be organic. It is going to be slightly different. That's what makes it fabulous. This one too, I'm just going to keep a swirl going rather than follow some different lines. It'll look perfectly fine, like it meant to be that way. You can kind of get a little, take a few liberties when you're at the edge of the quilt to make it work for you, if your stitching lines go off some. Around again, and then we're going to finish up those top little bits. Now you don't have to get every single top little bit here. I mean, I'm probably not going to get that tiny little swoop in there because no one's ever going to see it. It's going to be caught up in the seam allowances. So I think that that's good. I think we have done good enough here. Now before I make all this chalk go away like magic with the iron, now remember this only works with the ultimate white, not with any of the colors or the regular white, which we don't sell for that particular reason. We don't want to confuse you. Let's just take a look at this. Like we can see here, this one here came in quite a bit from where the line is, but you know what? It looks great. We got a nice curvy line, and that once that line goes away, no one's ever going to know. And really, that's the goal, is you want to have nice overall curvy lines. And if they're not perfectly on the line, no big deal, because eventually the goal is to not need the lines at all and just be able to do this freehand. And you can see not everything's perfect. I got super wavy here, but you know what? The texture and the overall look at this looks fabulous. And when you have just finished it, you may not love it because you know where every single flaw is. You are maybe trying something new for the first time and you're very close to it. You've been looking at it like this for the last like 15 minutes or however long it took you to do one of these, maybe 20, 30 if you're brand new. And you need to give it a couple of days and then look back at it. And I guarantee you're gonna be like, that was cool. I did a good job. I'm learning a new skill. It's looking fantastic. Then you can practice this as many times as you need to, so that way you have it down and you're ready to do it on a real quilt. Not that this isn't a real quilt, it totally is going to be a real quilt, but you know what I mean. That one that you're really proud of, that you want to have the really good quilting on. All right, time for the magic to happen and all the chalk to go away. All right, so here we have it. We have our stencil. This is our practice one to get the muscle memory down using that stencil, and we get this really cool curve and swirl. So the next one, we're going to do a simplified version of this, and we're going to free motion it, and then we're going to use that version to customize to show you how you can use this a bunch of different ways to make each quilt look a little bit different by using basic stitches in different ways. I hope you've been enjoying this series. Just a reminder, we have quilt kits in 4 different colors, so no matter what your tastes are, we got something for you. You can get those over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. And then also you can grab the stencils and the pounce pads that you need. We've got a kit of the 4 plus a pounce pad for you, so you can follow along and do this course with us and grab the pattern, so you can either do it quilt as you go on your domestic sewing machine or put it together first and then do it on the long arm. So thanks so much for following along, and until next time, happy quilting.